aircraft in Britain.
I warned them of the dangers ahead.
Which I know very well.
And I think he should apologise.
We should say no to it. And I will. Britain is booming.
The explosion reminded some of the attack in 2005 on London's transport system that killed 52 civilians. 7/7, as it came to be referred, also included the detonation of a bus in which 13 people died.
Breaking news we're getting from the PA Newswire that there's been reports of an explosion outside Liverpool Street Station. That, of course, in the East End of London.
Eyewitnesses say there was a bang heard during rush hour. Of course, now it's slightly after rush hour. That's according to British Transport Police. The noise could have been power-related, is some speculation we're hearing from Reuters.
But this was no train crash. Before help could reach them from the outside world, the survivors were left depending on one another. Colin jumped down onto the track and followed screams he could hear from people who'd been blown out of the train, including Thelma.
I opened my eyes and I saw that I was actually lying on the train track and by the train. Part of my body was underneath the train.
She told me her name was Thelma. She was a lawyer, she had a son, and I was assessing, looking at her legs. There was a lot of deep lacerations in her legs. Her left foot was twisted around, pretty much pointing the wrong way.
So again, we should say no to it, and I will.
It was, the police said, a significant terror plot that could have been worse than the 7/7 attacks on London.
Breaking news this morning, the arrest of 12 suspected terrorists in England for plotting attacks using bombs and explosives.
And the fireball just engulfed the whole tube carriage. Like, the whole carriage was orange, just coming towards us.
The streets around the station were quickly filled with the sound of sirens. The priority for the armed response units was to identify and contain any further threat to life.
29 people were treated in hospital. There were no serious injuries.
7 people killed and 48 injured, 21 of them in critical condition. A third major attack in 3 months, and 4 days before polling day. Will terror change the course of British politics?
The whole aim of practical politics is to keep the populace alarmed and hence clamorous to be led to safety by menacing it with an endless series of hobgoblins, most of them imaginary. As long as people can be menaced with a terrible threat, then the government is able to represent itself as their saviour, offering to look after them and protect them, if only people will do as they are told without question.
But the men who've now pleaded guilty to the plot arrived too late.
I heard a lady screaming. I was falling over people myself, and I was just saying to myself, keep upright, because either you're going to be crumpled to death or you've got a madman behind you, because I still didn't know what was going on.
People crazy, just they with a knife just push the people and kill it like they don't care about nothing.
You saw that?
Yeah, we was in front of them.
The attack began on London Bridge, just further up that road, when the men drove a van at pedestrians in the same way as the Westminster Bridge attack in March, before going on a rampage with knives.
Again, only the government can save us from this. Older readers will recall an endless series of such panics and dangers. Nuclear war is an old favourite, of course, and was very popular in the 1960s. But there have been many others.
Eerie footage of the devastation wrought by the 2005 London bombings has been shown in public for the first time.
Britain has raised its national threat level to severe. Boris Johnson chaired an emergency Cobra meeting saying that Britain will not be cowed by terrorism. On Sunday, a homemade bomb destroyed a taxi outside a hospital. This incident in Liverpool ended up killing a passenger.
Our inquiries also indicate that the device was brought into the cab by the passenger.
We believe we know the identity of the passenger, but we cannot confirm this at this time.
It is time that British people stopped feeling uneasy about denouncing their enemies. True, for now, the enemies seem to hold all the levers of power in this country, but I'm not sure that this situation will last forever.
It's been pointed out that the policies that she said were now more than ever required after the London Bridge killings are all policies that are listed in the Conservative manifesto. Jeremy Corbyn said democracy must prevail, but it was right that national campaigning was suspended for today.
This has got to be the worst. I hope it will not disrupt our process, because we have to have a democratic process, but I also hope we'll reflect on the need to have sufficient police officers on our streets, but also sufficient intelligence to look at the terrorist threat. But in response, as in Manchester, all communities must come together.
I'm Somali, sounds like surreal. Somali man, especially at that age, 25 years old.
The Somalian community, they're very sad.
This is Ali Harbi Ali in happier times, some years before his arrest at the scene of the murder of MP Sir David Amess.
All governments need these strategies to explain why they screw things up and to be able to lay the blame somewhere else. During Stalin's rule in the Soviet Union, everything that went wrong could be blamed on Trotsky's malign influence abroad. Then there were the hoarders and saboteurs. In America, secret communists were a popular way of explaining failure and encouraging people to support the government.
So in light of what we are learning about the changing threat, we need to review Britain's counter-terrorism strategy to make sure the police and security services have all the powers they need.
All Her Majesty's subjects join in extending a most cordial welcome to King Faisal of Saudi Arabia.
Some think we may already be too late.
You know, we're a dying breed. In 10 years, there will be very few of us left, unless something really important is done.
Discovering what looks like a suicide vest, the officers back off. Ushering members of the public to safety, two of the armed surveillance officers are seen here in the seconds after they shot the 20-year-old, maintaining a safe distance as they keep their guns trained on the fatally injured terrorist.
Earlier, Donald Trump tweeted, "Another attack in London by a loser terrorist. These are sick and demented people who were in the sights of Scotland Yard. Must be proactive."
We have to be very smart, we have to be very, very tough, which perhaps we're not nearly tough enough, but that is just an absolutely terrible thing. In fact, I'm going to call the Prime Minister right now.
Have you been briefed on any intelligence about the attack?
Yes, I have.
It has now reached a stage where the sight of the Union flag and the English Cross of St George are equated in the minds of many people with neo-Nazis and extreme right-wingers. Our national flags are now something to be ashamed of, and their display a matter of controversy. The enemy are all those who have worked towards such an end.
The Islam of Umar was an opening.
And this is the man behind Inspire, American-born jihadist Anwar al-Awlaki. Police say the British plotters had CDs of his radical preaching in the back of their car, despite the fact he was killed by a US drone strike in Yemen in 2011. Analysts say his message is still being heard.
He's incredibly influential. His death has only really taken away his ability and that of Al-Qaeda to respond to events as they happen. All of his most important ideological work, which provides the justification for violence and terrorism, has already been done.
And what they're saying effectively is that we need to have a broader engagement with Britain's Muslim community, that we need to challenge the ideological narrative and hate preachers. That is already being done. Back in 2014, for example, we had 120 scholars from around the world who wrote an open letter to Baghdadi and dismantled his religious basis, or his so-called religious basis for his ideology. We have a fantastic project already in the United Kingdom called Imams Online. Theresa May also talked about doing more work on the internet, taking down extremist material which is used as a tool of radicalization. She talked about dealing with the issue of segregation and separation. And again, I think it's important for us to draw a distinction between those communities that want to segregate, but those who economically have no choice but to live separate lives. So I think when Theresa May talks about a Britain that works for all of Britons, then it's important to look at the economic barriers that people have to where they live and the opportunities that they are given. So I think, and of course the review of the counter-terrorism strategy, I think these are important steps. Some of them are building on work that we're already doing, but I think change doesn't have to mean a bad change. I actually think this is an opportunity for us to make our counter-terrorism strategy better, for it to be evidence-based, and I think the Extremism Commission, which the Prime Minister has already referred to, could be a basis for that.
After a Cobra meeting today, the Prime Minister reiterated that the terrorism threat level will remain at severe as opposed to imminent, but will stay under review.
The public should go about their daily lives, but remain vigilant, and people who are travelling in London will see an increased armed police presence on the transport network, and they will see security will be increased, and the police will, of course, do what is necessary to protect the public.
Robinson was arrested on suspicion of causing a breach of the peace. He told police that he hadn't done anything wrong and that in fact he'd been assaulted himself.
Someone laid their hand and assaulted me outside court.
But I haven't done anything. Not the gold member cuffs for you. I'm afraid we'll have to use the bronze master, Peter. No, absolutely. No, Peter, Peter, I refuse. Peter. No. What?
I think it'll be people will be regarded more as statistics than as actual people.
Oh, I think all these atomic bombs will be dropping around the place. And one will get near the centre, because it will sort of make a huge, great big crater. And then the world will just melt, and the world will become one vast atomic explosion. And it will become like a supernova, stars.
I don't think it's going to be so nice. I think sort of all machines everywhere, everyone doing everything for you. You know, you'll get all bored, and I don't think it'll be so nice.
What we found over time is that attitudes to immigration have softened. More and more people see immigration as a good thing for the country. We've not kind of won the war. There's still 40% of people who think it's bad. But things are moving. There is kind of an opportunity there to talk about things in a different way. So in the national conversation, we ran an open survey. So it was open to absolutely anybody. We spent a lot of money trying to target people who were in that middle bit, so it wasn't just a kind of screaming fight between two ends of the spectrum. We then also did some polling, so a representative survey, all different places, all the way up to Shetland, all the way down to Penzance, talking to people about immigration. And what we found was that those conversations were incredibly moderate, incredibly nuanced, and quite complicated. And people had these deliberative discussions that we didn't necessarily think would be possible. We did think there would be a bit more pushback.
And what they're saying effectively is that we need to have a broader engagement with Britain's Muslim communities, that they are actually part of the solution.
They tend to segregate themselves and kind of keep within their own communities. So I don't think they integrate well, and I don't imagine they will in the future either, because it's just a cultural thing as opposed to anything else. I don't think it's a reflection of the Irish people or the communities around them. I think it's a reflection of their own culture.
I think so, up to a certain point, if you consider a certain section of the people that you deal with, most of the Irish people are open to immigrants, and you get a very good positive response from them. Right. But you have certain sections wherein who do not do very well and who are not dealing with the whole idea of immigrants coming here and working here. So it's probably, if you meet that a few people they could leave you a bad taste. Otherwise, I think it's good enough.
But I think the most worst I felt is while going for the housing.
Yeah.
So that's when they look for people who are either EU or Irish to give the houses on the first go.
Okay.
Then you have to go to the agents and try to work with them, and your chances are quite less in an immigrant to get a good house.
It's not very clear, it's very subtle. So it's like if you feel that, yes, otherwise it's not very
undercurrent.
It's under the table, something which goes on, like very subtle thing, but otherwise yes, it's prevalent, but not to a very, not something that you can actually point out and say that it's because of this, that.
I don't believe that Islamophobia, which has been defined as the fear or prejudiced viewpoint towards Islam, Muslims and matters pertaining to them, is at all the same as racial prejudice. But there is no doubt that just as some people have Jews on the brain, so too do others have Muslims on the brain and are as obsessed with the supposed shortcomings of the religion.
I think once again we're going to see London becoming less and less British and much more foreign in terms of the numbers of people that are coming from different countries of the world who are residing there. Certainly the white community or white British community would be again dramatically, let's say 60%. I think it's got to be close to that, if not more. But I think that's going to be spread across some big metropolitan areas. I think we're going to find Birmingham had massive changes. We already know that we have Leicester and Bradford and Leeds that are heading in those directions.
And it's one of the things that I've talked about consistently, that unfortunately, as far back as the last Labour government, there has been a policy of disengagement.
Yet because the Conservatives only act for and care about a few people at the top, we're falling behind other countries. Our pledge to you is simple. New Labour will give new life to Britain.
What is reality? Reality is not external. Reality exists not in the mind of the individual, which soon perishes, but in the mind of the party, which is collective and immortal. What the party says is reality is real.
But this isn't the first time that we're seeing language being changed. You can hear the idea that one doesn't talk about illegal migrants crossing the channel.
No.
First of all, they talk about migrants. Well, migrants are everybody that come from a different country, whether legal or illegal, or with an opportunity that the government here gives, such as those Syrian refugees through one of our relocation schemes that we have. So a migrant is legal and illegal. But it's very clear to most people that those people who are coming across on the Channel boats are illegal. They breach our own legislation. The only moment that they become legal is when they make an application for asylum in this country. So there's a big argument there.
I want to know what you think. I want you to know what kind of people we are, what kind of government we've been.
And this issue of security of our nation is far too serious an issue for it to be dealt with through the ideological whims of individual politicians. So I welcome what Theresa May has said, including the fact that there will be a review of our contest strategy to respond to the emerging threat of terrorism as we see it now.
But they've seen it now, and that's true.
But that's good from the government's point of view, because we know that the remedy is doing us good if it hurts. The more nasty and unpalatable the medicine, the more we tend to believe that the thing is doing us good.
The officer said in that moment he honestly believed he was about to be stabbed. The officers opened fire simultaneously, bringing the young terrorist's knife rampage to a halt 62 seconds after it began. Mark White, Sky News.
I don't want that.
It was only by chance the plot was discovered at all. Driving home after their abandoned mission, two of the men were pulled over by this routine traffic patrol. Their car was found to have no insurance and impounded.
I believe that at some point the mass of ordinary, normal and decent people will wake up and wonder what on earth they have done, letting these criminals and rogues take over their nation. When that day dawns, I think there might be a reckoning for at least some of what has been done here.
I want to know what you think. I want you to know what kind of people we are, what kind of government we'd be.
what kind of country.
Refreshment from start to finish.
The finding of truth and freedom.
If you want to change something, you have to be a part of something. You have to get involved, you have to educate yourself on it, and you have to make a change from inside. It's all good and well having opinions saying no one listens, but if you're not there to be listened to, who's going to listen?
The finding of truth and freedom.